C++ allows us to make something called an array, which would allow us to store a list of values all of the same type. This short presentation will show you an example of how we use arrays in C++. And remember, an array is simply a list by any other name. Let's consider a simple grades program to enter 4 grades. We would require, with our current skills, a variable for each grade, and we would have no way to alter the number of grades once we set up the program. We would have to rewrite the program each time if we had fewer or more grades. Now that's because we would have a line of code in our program that would look something like this: float, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and grade 4. Again, if we wanted 3 grades or if we wanted 6 grades, we would actually have to come back to the program, open it, place in more variables, and change everything so that we could in fact make it work for a different number of grades. So, to avoid having to rewrite our program every time, we could take advantage of 2 new concepts. One would be a concept of a list that would allow us to have any number of grades for a given student, and a second would be a way to access the grades in that list. The first new idea, the array, would allow us to make a list. In this case, we will have a list called grade list. Each one will be of type float. So when you look at this, float is the type of value that will be stored in every piece of the list. The name of the list is grade list, and in square brackets you'll see that we've set it up to hold at least 6 items. Now, we have a list for up to 6 grades in this case, which is because we have a place to place at least 6 float values in this list. Each value then can be called by the list name as well as its position. So for example, grade list 3 would refer to the 4th grade in the list. Now you might ask, what do you mean? Grade list 3 refers to the 4th grade. Shouldn't it be the 3rd? Well, actually no. And that's because in computer science we often start counting from 0. So the first position in an array is its location at 0. That's because instead of counting beginning with 1, we count beginning with 0. So if I wanted to count out 6 numbers, I would go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Note, I still have 6 locations, but my first location started at 0, not 1. This would mean that grade number 6, the last grade in the list, would be at position 5. So remember this, our first position in the list is always 0, and our last position in the list is always, however many numbers are in the list, minus 1. Now we need a second new idea. We need a way to access all the values in the list in a very determined and routine way. For this case, we have a for loop. Now there is another set of notes on Tigerbytes for loops under Program Flow Control. I suggest you review those as needed. The for loop allows us to loop around and do the same thing over and over again for a specific number of times. That would include allowing us to access each value, one value at a time, at one location at a time as we go through the for loop of the list. For example, let's say that we went for int I equals 0, I is less than 6, I plus plus. We start at 0, we keep going as long as our counter variable I is less than 6, and we add 1 to the I each time we go through the for loop. In this case, let's say we wanted to simply enter the 6 grades in our list. We could go C out, enter the next grade, and then C in, a grade list at I. Since I would change from 0 and then become 1, and then 2, and then 3, and so on, as long as I was less than 6, this would allow us to enter a grade for each of our 6 locations in the list. When this for loop was done, then we would simply continue and the program would run through the rest of the steps. Now, you'll note that at the top of this presentation, I also provided a link to a PDF file which will give you your first loop example that goes through the list and adds up all the numbers in the list. Look at that example and then study how we've used different for loops to do different things as we proceeded methodically through the list. Okay, remember, if you need to review the for loop, do so at the appropriate place in Tiger Bytes.